Jacob Fatu just ended 2 careers in one night. Jacob Fatu didn't just attack Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed last night, he obliterated them in the most vicious, most calculated, most brutal display of Samoan warfare WWE has ever aired on television. The Samoan werewolf just proved why he's the most dangerous member of the Anoa'i family by systematically destroying 2 of WWE's most protected monsters in a revenge assault that left both men broken, bloody, and questioning whether they can ever recover from what Jacob just did to them. This wasn't a wrestling match. This wasn't a sanctioned confrontation. This was personal vengeance executed with surgical precision by a man who's been waiting months for the perfect moment to make Bron and Bronson pay for crossing the wrong member of the bloodline. And what we witnessed was so intense, so unrelenting, so absolutely savage that even hardcore wrestling fans are questioning whether WWE went too far in letting Jacob unleash the full extent of his rage. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed thought they could jump Jacob backstage 3 weeks ago and get away with it. They thought attacking the newest bloodline member would send a message about who really runs Raw. Instead, they just signed their own death warrants, and last night Jacob Fatu collected the debt with interest that's going to keep both men off television for weeks. Hit that like button and subscribe to Wrestling News CC because I'm about to break down exactly how Jacob Fatu's revenge unfolded, why this assault changes the entire Raw power structure, and why Bron and Bronson just learned the hardest lesson of their careers: you never provoke a Samoan warrior without being prepared for the consequences. Let me walk you through this masterpiece of revenge because the way Jacob orchestrated this was genius mixed with absolute brutality. For 3 weeks, Bron and Bronson have been gloating about their sneak attack on Jacob, cutting promos about how they put the Samoan werewolf in his place, acting like jumping someone 3-on-1, they had help initially, made them tough instead of cowards. Jacob stayed silent, didn't cut revenge promos, didn't make threats, didn't even acknowledge the attack publicly, and that silence made Bron and Bronson comfortable, made them think Jacob was either too hurt or too scared to respond. They got careless. Started walking around backstage without their usual security, acting like the threat had passed. That was their fatal mistake. Last night's Raw, Bron Breakker had a scheduled match against a mid-card opponent. Standard squash match designed to make Bron look dominant heading toward a potential championship program. Bron's in the ring, working the match, completely focused on his opponent. Bronson Reed is at ringside as backup, making sure nothing goes wrong. Then the lights cut. Complete darkness. When they come back up, Jacob Fatu is standing on the stage, not running down the ramp like a typical revenge-seeking wrestler, just standing there, staring at the ring with those predator eyes that have made him one of the most intimidating performers in wrestling. Bron and Bronson immediately go on alert. They're expecting a fight, preparing for Jacob to charge the ring, but Jacob doesn't move. He just raises one hand and snaps his fingers. That's when the rest of Samoan SWAT emerges from the crowd, Jacob's brothers surrounding the ring from all sides. And suddenly Bron and Bronson realize they're not just facing one angry Samoan, they're facing an entire tactical unit that's been planning this moment for weeks. Bron tries to escape through the crowd. Blocked. Bronson tries to run up the ramp. Blocked. Every exit is cut off by Samoan SWAT members who aren't there to wrestle, they're there to ensure Bron and Bronson can't escape what's coming. Then Jacob moves. And what happens next is the most systematic destruction I've seen in modern wrestling. Jacob enters the ring and goes straight for Bron. Not with wild, emotional attacks, with calculated strikes designed to inflict maximum damage. A super kick that drops Bron immediately. Then Jacob picks him up and delivers a Samoan drop so vicious that the ring shakes. But Jacob's not done. Not even close. He drags Bron to the corner, positions him against the turnbuckles, and hits a running hip attack that looks like it cracks Bron's ribs. Bron collapses, gasping for air, and Jacob just stares at him with zero emotion. This isn't anger, this is execution. Bronson Reed tries to help his partner. Mistake. Jacob's brothers grab Bronson and hold him in place, forcing him to watch what Jacob does to Bron, making sure Bronson understands that his turn is coming and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Jacob pulls Bron to the center of the ring. The crowd is losing it, half cheering for the revenge, half stunned by the brutality. Jacob signals to the crowd, then climbs to the top rope. 300 pounds of Samoan warrior balancing on the top turnbuckle. And then he launches himself with a moonsault that would be impressive from a cruiserweight but is absolutely devastating from someone Jacob's size. The impact when Jacob crashes down on Bron sounds like a car accident. Bron's body goes limp. Medical staff starts moving toward the ring but security holds them back. This isn't over yet, and Jacob made sure WWE understood that interrupting would only make things worse. Jacob stands over Bron's unconscious body, then turns his attention to Bronson Reed. Samoan SWAT releases Bronson and pushes him into the ring. Bronson, normally one of the most intimidating big men on the roster, looks legitimately terrified because he just watched Jacob dismantle Bron with surgical precision and knows he's next. Bronson tries to talk his way out, tries to apologize, tries to say the attack 3 weeks ago was just business and nothing personal. Jacob's response? A headbutt so stiff that Bronson drops to his knees immediately, blood starting to flow from his forehead. What Jacob does to Bronson next is even more brutal than what he did to Bron because Bronson is bigger, which means Jacob has to work harder to break him. And Jacob seems to relish the challenge. Multiple Samoan drops. A powerbomb that nearly breaks the ring. Repeated strikes to Bronson's midsection that target the same ribs over and over until Bronson can barely breathe. Then comes the finale. Jacob has both Bron and Bronson laid out in the ring broken, bleeding, barely conscious. And instead of just leaving them like that, Jacob calls for a table. Samoan SWAT brings one into the ring, sets it up, and Jacob proceeds to put both men through it with a double Samoan drop that shatters the table into pieces. The crowd is on their feet. The announcers are stunned into silence. And Jacob Fatu stands in the middle of the carnage he created, raises his arms, and lets out a war cry that echoes through the entire arena. That's how you execute revenge. Not with emotional outbursts or wild attacks. With calculated destruction that sends an unmistakable message to everyone on the roster. The Samoan werewolf is not someone you attack without facing severe consequences. Here's why this assault was so significant beyond just being brutal. First, it establishes Jacob Fatu as the most dangerous individual on Raw. Not just strong dangerous. There's a difference. Bron Breakker is strong. Bronson Reed is strong. But Jacob just proved he's on another level entirely when it comes to inflicting damage. Second, it validates Samoan SWAT as a legitimate threat. This wasn't Jacob getting lucky or catching opponents off guard. This was a coordinated tactical operation where every member played their role perfectly. That level of organization makes them terrifying going forward. Third, it sends a message to the bloodline on SmackDown. Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, they're watching this and realizing that Jacob doesn't need their approval or their leadership. He's built his own power structure, his own family unit, and he's perfectly capable of handling business without them. That creates fascinating dynamics for future bloodline interactions. The locker room reaction is reportedly a mixture of awe and fear. Wrestlers are impressed by how perfectly Jacob executed his revenge. But they're also nervous because if Jacob can do this to Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed, two of the most protected monsters on the roster, what could he do to them if they cross him? That fear creates respect. And respect creates power. Jacob Fatu just positioned himself as someone you don't mess with unless you're prepared for war. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed are both reportedly dealing with legitimate injuries from this assault, nothing career-threatening, but enough to sideline them for 2 to 3 weeks while they recover. And that's smart booking. You can't have someone get destroyed this thoroughly and show up on TV the next week like nothing happened. There need to be consequences that feel real. Here's what should happen next. Bron and Bronson return in a few weeks changed. Not necessarily heel turns, but definitely with a newfound respect for Jacob and a recognition that they made a mistake attacking him. That leads to either an uneasy truce where everyone stays out of each other's way, or it escalates into a prolonged war where Bron and Bronson seek revenge for the revenge. Either direction creates compelling television. But the worst thing WWE could do is just drop this storyline and pretend it never happened. This assault was too brutal, too impactful to just forget. It needs to have lasting consequences for everyone involved. My prediction? This leads to a massive 6-man tag at Elimination Chamber or WrestleMania. Samoan SWAT versus Bron Breakker, Bronson Reed, and a third partner, possibly someone from the Vision who has their own grudge against Jacob. High-stakes match that gives Bron and Bronson a chance at redemption while further establishing Samoan SWAT as dominant. And Jacob? Jacob should win that match decisively, cementing his position as the most dangerous force on Raw and setting up even bigger programs heading into the summer. Drop your thoughts. Was Jacob's revenge justified or did he go too far? Should Bron and Bronson get a chance at payback or accept the L and move on? And is Jacob Fatu now the most dangerous man in WWE? Comments below because this is the most intense revenge storyline of 2026. This is Wrestling News CC, bringing you coverage of wrestling's most brutal moments. Subscribe for continued analysis of Jacob Fatu's rise to power and whether anyone can stop Samoan SWAT's dominance. Jacob Fatu delivered perfect revenge. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed got destroyed. And the entire WWE universe just witnessed why you never cross a Samoan warrior who's been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is what real revenge looks like. Not petty pranks or one-upmanship. Systematic destruction that leaves no doubt about who won this war. Jacob Fatu is the most dangerous man on Raw. And everyone else better take notice before they become his next target.